Welcome to Across the Curve.
When you line up safety, leadership, and excellence, that opens the door for lots of guests. And I personally feel that, there can't be a more valiant effort in the world than to protect and save lives. We hope the time that you spend with us will help you to understand how the future of work is shifting and what we can expect the workplace to look like in the coming years. Our guest today is Elliot Massey. Our guest today is Michael Yaffe. Angel is the VP of Global Human Resources at AdCourt Incorporated. Don is an executive safety and risk management professional with 4 decades of experience. Chester has been called the Apostle of Appreciation by Canada's Globe and Mail. Derek is an Emmy award-winning writer, producer, director, and actor. We hope the time you spend with us will help you to understand how storytelling is a key to learning.
Boy, storytelling is a wonderful topic, and let's explore the story.
Welcome to Across the Curve with Craig Sexton. Sponsored by DSS Plus, transforming business results through the development of a safe, efficient, and capable workforce. DSS Plus, protect, transform, sustain. Your host today has over 3 decades of experience in the entertainment industry from Los Angeles to New York. He is an award-winning writer, producer, and director. He has been recognized for his extensive work around the affective approach and communicating from the heart. He brings his talents to bear at DSS Plus with breakthroughs in communication, employee engagement, and culture transformation. He is everybody's best friend and soon to be yours. Craig Sexton.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to Across the Curve podcast. I'm Craig Sexton, the Global Creative Director here at DSS Plus, and we hope the time that you spend with us will help you to understand how serious injuries and fatalities can be prevented in your workplace. But before we do that, I want to say hello and bring in my producer extraordinaire, Jay Gates. Jay, how are you this morning?
Hey, Craig, how are you? Looking good, my friend. So you can say I'm loving the shirt. I was trying to step it up a notch and try to match you with something nice and pop it on the shirt.
Yeah, well,
today.
you did well. You know what I say? All you need is a paisley shirt and a good hair day, and you're good to go, right?
I feel you. I'm just glad I didn't had spaghetti for lunch, and I'm glad I'm not wearing it because it was all over the place. Which I got to tell you, man. So I was having spaghetti for lunch for the 4th day in a row, and I was talking to my sister-in-law last week. She's gotten into meal prepping, and I said, that's nothing new. All you have to do is make spaghetti for dinner one time, and you've meal prepped for the whole week. Because I'm still not even halfway through that stuff. So
I'm not sure that's a good dietary plan, but if it's working for you, it's good for me.
It's filling, man. I'll tell you that much. It's getting the job done. We'll say that for something.
Well,
quick
hey, man, I'm excited about today's show because this is a topic that is very serious. Mm-hmm. And it can be complicated, but somebody's going to enlighten us and help us understand it better. And man, we could not have a better person to discuss this with. He is known as the guru of this topic. He has been in this field forever. So what do you say, Jay? Why don't we just jump right in and introduce our guest? I think it's going to be an amazing show.
I couldn't agree anymore.
Well, our guest today is Don Martin. Don is an executive safety and risk management professional with 4 decades of experience. He is globally recognized expert in serious injury and fatality prevention, better known as SIFs. Don works with company executives worldwide to design and implement environmental health and safety management systems, risk management programs, fatality prevention programs, and organizational culture change initiatives. Don directed a Sentinel Global research project on SIF, resulting in a peer-reviewed journal publication, and led implementation of SIF prevention projects for over 200 companies worldwide that demonstrated results. Welcome to the show, Don. We are delighted to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Jay. I'm really happy to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation to join you in this conversation.
Well, it's going to be great, Don, and we're glad to have you here about this serious topic of SIFs. But before we get started, how did you get involved in the area of this area of safety?
Well, I started my safety profession over 40 years ago, if you want to know that.
Yeah, there you go.
But I was an environmental science major when I was in college, and that was at the time when EPA was coming out and OSHA
Right.
was coming out, and I was all about protecting the environment. And I was going to college down near the Houston Ship Channel area. And what I noticed with all the research I was doing in my undergraduate program was there's all this air pollution and water pollution and hazardous waste pollution that we were trying to protect the environment from. And I asked my college professor, what about the workers in these facilities where all this stuff is being produced? How are they affected
Right.
by all this pollution? And we did a little bit of investigation into that, and we found out that there was this whole field called safety, health, and industrial hygiene. And that's where I went right after college. I said, I think I want to spend my time helping how to figure out how to protect people who are working in these hazardous work environments. And so that's how I started my career 40 years ago. So I spent a lot of time as an EHS director working in the petrochemical refining sector, and then I worked in the pulp and paper industry. And while I was an EHS director, I had these experiences where I was working to improve safety, but I just didn't feel like I was working on the right things. And so I was working on getting our recordable injury rates lower, but we still kept having what I thought at the time were these one off events that were near fatalities, they were life altering events, or they were really important near misses that could have cost somebody a life, but it didn't.
Right.
And I just felt like I was missing the boat. And then that's where I started to direct my attention to this field of serious injury and fatality prevention as more of a targeted approach to address what really matters.
Yeah, well, I wonder, Don, that probably leads me right into the next question I had for you. I was going to ask you, 40 years, that's quite a career. What motivates you to stay in this field for 40 years?
I think what motivates me is this rewarding feeling that you're helping to protect somebody's life at work, and you know that it's also protecting that person's family. I've had experiences in my career where a worker at my facility lost their life. And when you witness and you feel the impact that that has on that person's family and their friends and their coworkers, it creates this moment inside you where you say, I can never let that happen again to anybody. And you get dedicated to that. And when you start making progress on it and you start seeing improvements being made, you know that you're helping that situation. I've always felt like as you go through your own life, that what makes, your life or my life valuable to me is the fact that I have provided some kind of service to other people. And,
Right.
and the safety profession allows that to happen for me.
Right, right, right. I mean, that's actually sounds like that was a turning point event in your career, was it?
Yeah, I've had several turning points in my career. One, we had an explosion at our refinery where a man ended up in the burn unit at Herman Hospital, and
Right.
I had to go to interview him because we had no idea how this thing happened. This explosion happened, and he was the only one that had the information. I had to go interview him, and I'll just tell you, when you're in that man's hospital room with his wife and his daughter looking at you and asking, how did you let this happen to my dad or my husband?
Wow.
That hits you really, really hard. And you say, this is why I need to do a better job. This is why my company needs to do a better job. This is why we need to care better. I was in the paper industry, and another, turning point. I was in the paper industry. I had transferred up to Maine to change industries. And my first week on the job, I get called in the middle of the night to go into the first aid room at the paper mill, and this 18-year-old girl who was the daughter of one of the people who worked at the paper mill. She had a summer job there. We had a program where if you were a child of an employee and you were going to college, we'd give you a summer job at this mill. Well, she was doing a job on one of the great big paper machines, and these paper machines are as big as a football field.
Wow.
And she put her hand into an in-running nip point and ended up amputating 3 of her fingers. And so when I got to the first aid emergency room, she was there wrapped up and getting put into an ambulance, and the co-workers that she was working with were there. And guess who walked into the ER? Her dad. Her dad walked into the ER. He looked at his co-workers he'd been working with these guys for 20 or 30 years. And he said, "You were supposed to protect my baby."
Mm.
That's what I wanted you to do, was to look out for her and protect her. And you didn't do it. And I'm standing there watching this, and you can't help but, you have tears coming down your face. Your heart is grabbing you, and you're thinking, this is why I do this. This is why we need to do better. And so
Right.
you have moments like that where safety is not a number anymore. Safety is a person. Safety is a human being. Safety is an individual that has a family. And it really creates this whole new dynamic about why you're even in this profession in the first place. And that really has helped me carry myself through this whole career and mentor other safety professionals to have the same level of emotional caring about why we do this job.
Wow. I mean, that's gut wrenching. I'm wondering if you can share with us, Don, what operating philosophies have you developed over the years that you could share with us and our listeners?
Well, I'd say there's quite a few that I've developed or learned over the years. One of them is that there's always at least 2 sides to every story.
Right.
So when you're investigating an incident, typically I may hear one side of the story that says, that worker knew better, that worker did something wrong. But when you take the time to interview the worker and the colleagues that person works with, you usually find out there's a lot more to the story, that the worker didn't intentionally decide to not follow a rule or intentionally decide to take a risk. There were so many other factors that were at play that put them in that situation. And that was the only thing that they naturally could do to perform the job. And then they got hurt. So that's one of those big lessons, is like, there's always another side to the story if you're willing to take the time to go look for it. The other one is, I think it's around what I call the importance of source documents. And again, when an event happens and you start investigating why it happened, you start asking people, well, what's the procedure you're supposed to follow? And what does the standard say? What does the policy say? And people just sort of go off of their own memories about what they think it says. And then when you go and find the source document, like the written procedure or the operating instructions or the maintenance manual, you find the truth of the matter in there. And so that source document provides, an accurate view of how that job is supposed to be done. But over time, people have deviated from it, and the way they do it, 10 years later becomes the way. but it's
Right.
such a difference. So I keep going back to and asking for what's the source document. And then I think the other time, the other big lesson learned for me or operating principle is uh, form an informed opinion. And by that, I mean there are data sources that you have to use to form an accurate opinion or an accurate view of what's happening in that situation. That relying on what other people tell you and relying on your own assumptions and biases can lead you down the wrong path. And so I like to make sure that I'm using my brain to evaluate as much objective data as possible, but recognizing that there is also some subjective data that is worth considering to form my own opinion and not to jump on the first opinion that somebody presents to me. So I think using data and evidence to support an informed opinion turns out to be a really important operating philosophy.
Right, right, right. Look, I've got kind of a two-parted question here. I think a lot of people listening are thinking to themselves, well, look, nobody, no organization intends on having a serious injury or a fatality, right? That's not what nobody wants that to happen in their organization. So when you go in and talk to organizations about SIF prevention, where do you start? I mean, what's the starting point, and how do you get companies executives to buy into this idea of SIF prevention, even if they haven't had a serious injury or fatality?
Well, I think you hit the right word about where it starts. It's at the executive level. Is that when top executives in a company show by their behaviors and by their thinking and by their decisions that this is the number one thing that they care about, other people pick that up. I have found that if the executives are really not interested in this subject, it's going to get limited traction in the organization.
Right.
And it's going to be very difficult for anybody else to pick up this banner and run with it. So, most executives that I talk to, interestingly enough, over the last decade, when I ask them about what keeps them up at night and what they're most worried about, this is the subject. They don't want to know that they're running an operation that has the vulnerability where people can get killed. They want to know for a fact that the controls are in place and the controls are performing the way they want them to fully protect their people. And so when I hear an executive talk that way, I know that we're on the right track toward gaining interest and traction inside the organization. And interestingly enough, I have worked with very few executives that ask for a return on investment when they decide to put aside resources to invest in an SIF prevention program. They're doing it because they feel like they have an ethical and moral responsibility to do the right thing to protect their employees just like they would protect any member of their family.
Right.
And these great executives, they don't need a calculated financial ROI to know that they need to invest time, people, and resources into solving this problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, Don, because when we go out and I go out and talk to people about culture transformation, one of the things that we find out is a benefit from SIF prevention is that when you show a workforce, and I'm interested in your take on this, when you show a workforce that you authentically care about their safety and their well-being, you will get discretionary effort from them. I mean, it's a benefit that's kind of unseen, but when you can show people in an organization that you authentically, I mean, really care about their safety and their well-being as people and getting them home at the end of the day to people that they love and that love them, they will give you that discretionary effort. Actually, we found out that companies become more productive. They become more profitable when they invest in SIP prevention. What's your take on that?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when managers, leaders, executives, when they show people that they care, and that comes from the heart and the mind, they
Right.
show people that they care, people reciprocate that effort. They say, you know what? If you care about me, I care about you. I'll care about this company. But the executives have to show it first. And SIF prevention is a great place to do that. Picture a situation where a worker in a rail yard at a company site is on top of the rail car, and he's doing something up by the dome lid, and he's not wearing fall protection. His rail car gets bumped by another rail car, and he falls off the top of the rail car.
Right.
Well, on his way down, he grabs the handrail that's around the dome lid, catches himself, pulls himself back up. Now, he reports that as a near miss. Now, in a trusting organization that executive has created, in a trusting organization, that worker knows that they're not going to get punished for not wearing their fall protection. The executive is going to come out there and have a look at what's going on and talk to that worker, but ask important questions like, why is it that we don't wear fall protection? And that worker may say, because it's not available, or because the only harness that we have belongs to somebody else. It's not mine, or there's no place to connect it to. And then the other questions around, why did that rail car get bumped by another rail car? Well, that executive can solve that problem. Now, when that person takes that time to go out there and have that conversation, they're showing people that they care and they're interested in learning and getting better. They're not interested in blaming and punishing people.
Right.
But when they demonstrate that, people start to look up and they start to feel differently about that leader and about the company. And they say, and then to your point, now discretionary effort is now on the table.
Right.
Now I feel like I can do something extra to help my coworkers and my company.
Absolutely. So, I think for a lot of people out there listening, everybody wants this in their organization, right? I mean, I'm sure there's people driving in their cars or listening to this podcast right now that are going, geez, I need to be doing this for my organization, but it sounds big. It sounds, it's a lot to take in. Like, where do you start, Don? Like, just give me an example. I mean, I don't need a client's name, but just what does it look like? I mean, help explain to our audience what it actually looks like when you come into an organization. Where do you start? How does it start?
Well, one of the first things that we do, and this is assuming that we have executive level interest, and so they've actually sponsored us to be there. What we like to do is look at the data that's available in terms of injury reports, near miss reports, property damage reports, because that is a rich source of information about these things called SIF precursors.
Right.
And if you looked at that chart that has the triangle pyramid on it, you'll see that these SIF precursors are at the bottom of the accident triangle.
Right.
Now,
why don't you explain this to us, Don?
So an SIF precursor, it's a three-part definition. The first part is there's an SIF risk situation present. So by looking at the data, you can tell, people work at height, people work in confined spaces, people work near and around suspended and rigged loads. People might be working inside of trenches. So there's this SIF risk situation that's present. And in order to protect the people who are working in that situation, part two of the definition comes into play. There are management system controls, we can call them critical controls, that must be in place every single time without fail to protect that worker. So like for protecting somebody from work at height falls, You have to have a platform that has a railing on it. You have to wear your personal fall arrest harness. Your harness has to be connected to a lanyard that's connected to an anchor point. You have to have a permit to work at height. Now,
Right.
if I walk up to that job site, all 5 or 6 of those critical controls must be in place and they must be functioning to protect that worker. But what happens is the third part of that formula happens, and that is one or more of those controls is missing, it's not in place, or it's underperforming somehow. So I've got a fall arrest harness on, but there's no anchor point for me to connect to. I'm up on a platform, but there's no railing. That's a critical control and it's missing. And part 3 of this precursor formula says that situation persists in the work environment for a long enough period of time. And if that situation stays that way long enough, eventually you will have an SIF event. So the data leads you to identify these things called SIF precursors, and they happen in a lot of different places. They happen in near miss reports, first aid reports, recordable injury medical reports, lost time injuries, property damage. So all of these types of events are very rich sources of information to find these precursors. Once we find these precursors, now we know what the risk situations are that people are in. Now we can identify the critical controls that must be in place. So that's the next big part of a SIF project is we would go out and we would look for the presence of these critical controls. And we do this in a very formal way by going out, observing and interviewing and collecting information, putting information in a database. And if we see a critical control missing, we stop the job. We put the control in place and then we allow the job to continue. All of this is data collection, but this climate that gets created around setting a job up right, stopping the job if the controls are not present, and correcting the controls, all of that climate is created by leadership in the organization. So that's another big part of an SIF prevention program is making sure that the leaders and the workers together are aligned on creating what we'll call this SIF risk aware culture so that they're looking out for each other, they're helping each other, and they know where the SIF risk is and they know how to control it. And then out of that comes a whole dashboard of SIF metrics. So
Right.
a lot of leading metrics and a lot of process health metrics that help the executive team monitor the health of the program and make sure that they're actually collecting verifiable information about the situations being under control in the workplace.
Right. Is there a threshold, Don? Like, is there a number of employees in an organization where this becomes more effective? Or, I mean, do you need to have at least a minimum of 50 employees or 20 or 10, or is it 500? Is there a threshold?
No, it's really not based on the number of employees. I think it would be more based on the SIF risk situations that
Right.
people face. And so there's typically about 15 or 20 different types of major SIF risk situations. And I would say that if any one of those situations is present in an organization, then they would have a bona fide need to implement some type of an SIF protection program.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, so look, Don, over the next 10 years, what do you see happening to advance, SIP prevention?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you go back and look at that graph, that data chart with the black and the red lines on it, I'm going
Yeah,
to
there you
answer
go.
my question by setting it up with this.
Okay.
So if I look at the last 20 or 25 years, that black line shows continuous improvement in recordable injury rate, TRI, total recordable injury rate.
Right. We
If,
got
that,
you.
if I was a downhill skier, I would like to ski on that slope. That would be
Yes.
nice. It shows continuous improvement. So over 20, 25 years, we've gone from an 8.5 to a 2.8 recordable rate. But have a look at that red line. That red line is fatality rate in the United States. Over the last 10 years, that line is flat. It is zero improvement. So this is the thing that really bugs me as a safety professional, and it's one of those things that keeps me from retiring. So if you want me to retire, we got to bend that red line in a different direction. So we call that bending the SIF curve. So
Right.
if we can turn that SIF curve south, then we're going to make progress. So to your question, so over the next 10 years, what has to happen for that red line to change direction? And the answer is, well, we know a lot of what needs to be done, and that is around, you identify SIF risk situation, you identify SIF precursors, you identify the critical controls, you verify that those critical controls are in place. So you got to have a bona fide SIF prevention program. But outside of that, technology is our friend.
Right.
So as technology evolves and advances, there are a lot of technology solutions out there that will enable us to create a safer work environment. Technologies that would enable us to stop a human being moments before they interact with a fatal situation. So I think technology advances are going to be a huge change that happens over the next 10 years. The other thing I think that has to happen is more and more leaders have to spend time understanding the fundamentals of human behavior, understanding why people do what they do. And, so affective psychology, things like that, understanding, applied behavior analysis, that
Right.
people do certain behaviors because there are certain positive consequences in it for them.
Yeah, sure.
But when leaders understand more about human behavior and they understand the neuroscience behind human behavior, we can make a lot more progress. And then I think that as we evolve in what we call prevention through design or inherently safer design, that's the next big thing. Is we have to design these jobs so that when an error happens, because human beings will make mistakes, when an error happens, we have error tolerance. And that is, I can make a mistake, and that mistake will not immediately result in a catastrophic outcome. So, prevention through design, inherently safer design concepts say, let's design the job so that the job gets done safely, even if I make mistakes. So if I fail safely.
Sure, sure. That makes a lot of sense. Wow, Don, you are the you are the go-to guy on SIFs, and man, we've had a great time having you here today, and I've learned a lot. I know our audience has. Look, before we wrap up, I'm just kind of interested. Have you ever been given? Has anyone ever given you any advice about yourself that turned out to be wrong?
Yes, Craig, that has happened to me several times in my career. So let me wrap it up with a story about that.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
So over my career, I have thought about 5 different times when people told me that I couldn't do something. And this is sort of like a life lesson for me.
Yeah.
So I had in one of my earlier careers, I had my leadership team tell me that I didn't have the credentials or the background to become a certified industrial hygienist, a CIH. And
Right.
safety professionals in the audience will know exactly what a CIH is.
Sure.
They told me I could never be a CIH. Well, I went out and became a CIH.
There you go.
And I was a CIH for 30 years. All right. So they told me I couldn't do that. I had another point in one of my careers where I was sitting with the vice president of EHS at one of my companies, and I asked him, and he was asking me what I wanted to do in my career, and I said, I think I would like to become a vice president. And he looked me square in the eyes, and he says, "You'll never be a vice president. You don't have anything what it takes to be a vice president." Well, later in my career, I became not only a vice president, but a senior vice president at one of my previous companies. I had another leader I work with tell me that I was a terrible writer, that I didn't understand what it took to get articles published in professional journals, and that I would never succeed in that area. And lo and behold, I've had numerous articles published in numerous journals prove that person wrong.
Look, I know where the moral of this story is going. I mean, it's really, really simple, Don. Don't tell me that you can't do something, because you'll go do it.
And one of my other stories was at one of my paper mills. When I first got there, we had a recordable injury rate of 36. 36. And I stood up in front of 1,200 people and told them that I believed that we could work 1 million hours without a lost time injury and get our recordable injury rate below 2. And collectively, as a group, those 1,200 people laughed out loud. They said it couldn't be done. Well, guess what, Craig? You know the end of that story.
I know where this is going, right?
And one more. I was a competitive runner for a really long time, and I wanted to break a 4-minute mile. And I was a miler, and I wanted to break a 4-minute mile. And one of the best coaches I had, he worked with me for 5, 6, 7 years. And he said, "Don, I got bad news for you. You're never going to break a 4-minute mile." You know what? He was right. The best I could ever do was a 4:23. I never broke a 4-minute mile. So the moral of my story, Craig, has been, so out of these 5 instances, 4 times people were wrong. So 80% of the time, when people tell you you can't do something, they're wrong.
There you go. Well, that's a great way to wrap up. And look, and I've just figured out, Don, that what I'm going to do now is just figure out what I need from you, and then tell you that you can't do it. That way, I'm assured it's going to get done, right?
Yeah, don't tell my boss that, though.
That's my new strategy. Hey, Don, honestly, I know how busy you are. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule today to spend a little bit of time with us to educate us about what SIFs are, what SIF prevention looks like, how to make it happen in your organization. I'm sure there are going to be people that are going to be interested in talking to you. But again, thank you for taking an hour out of your busy schedule to spend it with us. It's been great. I've had a great time. I hope you had a good time.
I did, Craig. I love talking to you, and you can tell I have a passion about this subject. And
without question.
It's near and dear to my heart. So thank you for the opportunity.
Alrighty, my friend. Well, we will see you soon. And before we get out of here, I want to give a special thanks to our producer, Jay Gates. Thank you, Jay. And to the rest of the DSS Plus team who made this podcast possible. And if you found the information and insights in this podcast helpful, well, please share it with others. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you find your podcast. And Across the Curve was brought to you by DSS Plus. And for more information, just go to consultdss.com. That's consultdss.com. I'm Craig Sexton, and that's how the story was told to me. And now it's been told to you. Take care.
All right, welcome to the cleanup. Here we are in my favorite part of the show. We just got done talking to Mr. Don Martin, and I went back and did some fact checking.
Well, I know this is your favorite part of the show because it's where you get to actually find all the mistakes that I made. I don't think I had any pronunciation mistakes this time, Jay. So I think I'm clean there. I made it through that part, right?
Yeah, actually, you were very clean overall. I mean, it was there's nothing really to fact check on this one. There's so much valuable information, and it was all accurate.
Well,
So,
that's
hey, golf
well,
clap
that's
to
good
you, sir.
to know. Well, I think really the guy that gets the credit here is Don Martin, right?
Well,
This
yeah,
guy knows his stuff, doesn't he? I mean,
yeah.
what a wealth of information he was.
And the guests should always get the credit because we're just here to talk.
Yeah.
They're here to share the information. We like to go back and forth, but that's what they're there for. They're here to share with us because me and you could just talk all day, but that's why we
Yeah.
have guests.
He, he's such an interesting guy, and he is literally the authority in this topic of SIFs, right? I mean, I don't know anybody that knows more about this or really has had more boots on the ground, real world experience with SIFs than Don has. But also, you know what I love about him? He's such a really great, personable guy, and I like the way that he ended his talking about. The things that people told him that he couldn't do, and
Yeah,
he had a list of things that people told him that he couldn't
yeah,
do,
man.
and he had done
He's got
them
a lot of
all. But
haters that he just put down, man.
yeah, he had done them all, and he came up with the percentage. He said, "So I've got an 80% record. I think that's what he said. Don't
Yeah,
fact check me on that one, though."
no, that was accurate. 4 out of 5, 80%.
Yeah, 4 out of 5. He said, "So I'm 80%." So what I took away from that, I was like, "Well, great. I just know that when I need something from Don, all we need to do is just tell him he can't do it, and he'll go out and do it for sure, right?"
Yeah, or at least there's an 80% chance he will. And then, if we fall on that 20%, I'm sure he's going to work hard to fix that. So we'll just do it again, and then now we got a better percentage.
I know he is. But are you telling me that I made it through that entire podcast clean with no mistakes? I didn't stretch the truth, or we were just right on track.
No mispronunciations of names.
Go.
So yeah, no, it was no inaccurate facts or statistics. So yeah, great job.
Well, hey, I like it when the cleanups are clean. I like it when they're fast and we do a good job. Again, let's just give a shout out to Don Martin. If you want to know more about SIFs and how to prevent them in your organization, please go to consultdss.com and you can find out everything you want to know there. We'll hook you up with Don. It'll be awesome. And Jay, thanks for keeping my feet to the fire on the cleanup. Thanks for being here. Just doing a great job. So look,
that's what we do.
Until next time, Jay, I'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
watching.